Ready to start? Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Stefan. I'm a software engineer on the Scala compiler team at Lightbend. And I'd like to talk about the last 10% today. So this is named after the 90-90 rule that you may have seen. It says the first 90% of the code accounts for the first 90% of the development time. The remaining 10% of the code accounts for the other 90% of the development time. So I was looking through the schedule for this conference, and I thought there's a corollary here. 90% of the conference talks seem to be about the first 90%. So what I'd like to do is to work on something here that is almost always part of the last 10%. So we're going to take some Scala code and turn it into a library that is published as an open source library for everyone to use and to contribute to, which is a thing that frequently takes a lot of time and seems to be kind of scary, but with a bit of preparation that I did and by following the scripts and the manuals, I think we can get it done in 45 minutes. So the difficult part here is not really how to do it, but what to do. You know you want to publish it, yeah, that's okay, but there are still a lot of decisions to be made, and you have to know where to publish and a few more details. But once you know the broad direction in which you want to go, you can just follow the instructions, follow the path, and you'll get the job done. But just knowing these broad directions, that's the difficult part here. By necessity, I have to take an opinionated approach here. Often there are many ways to do something, and you can have long discussions about things like which license to pick for your project. I will not do this here. I will just do something that works for me so that we can finish this in time. So if we want to publish a library that's usable by others, maybe we should first ask the questions, where do the libraries that we're already using come from? Because we should probably publish ours in the same place so that others can use it. So we don't live in the dark ages anymore, where you download a jar file and drop that into some lib folder manually. What you do is you tell your build tool, like SBT in this case, the coordinates of the library. And these coordinates consist of a group ID, an artifact ID, and a version number. And then we see this log here from SBT, where it runs through all these libraries that it needs, and it resolves them, which means it finds and downloads the jars from somewhere. So where is somewhere? Well, the short answer is Maven Central. That's a central repository for open source Java artifacts. It's run by a company called Zonotype, who make a repository manager called Nexus. And OK, that's the downside of using the screen mode that I have to use here. So if you ping me, everyone will get the benefit. So there's another company, a big competitor called JFrog, and they make repository managers called Artifactory and Bintray, and they run something called JCenter, which is a bit newer than Maven Central. It aggregates repositories, including Maven Central, and SBT uses that as well by default. So if we can get our library into either Maven Central or JCenter, we're good to go. We also have our local repository, the .iv2/local in the home folder, where we can publish stuff for testing. And of course, all of this can be changed both at the level of your local SBT setup, so you could run everything through a local proxy, for example, like I am doing on this machine, or you can add new repositories in your project if you want to add a library that is not on Maven Central or on JCenter. So let's take a quick detour to JavaScript. I know it's always easy to make jokes about the JavaScript ecosystem, but that doesn't stop me from actually doing it. So there once was this tiny library in JavaScript called leftpad, and it did only one thing, and it did it very well. Well, apart from the performance, but that's a different issue. It leftpads a string with a number of spaces or other characters. And this seems trivial, but we're doing Scala here, so it's a one-liner. In JavaScript, it's not that trivial, and it's a useful function. So lots of other JavaScript libraries came to depend on it. And you can read the whole story by following this link here. To cut it short, the author deleted it from NPM, which is JavaScript's version of Maven Central. And yeah, this broke everything. So on the right-hand side here, you can see an accurate depiction of NPM. And down here, that's left pad. So they eventually had to restore it against the wishes of the author, just to keep the whole system from breaking down. Fortunately, this cannot happen with Maven Central, because once you publish something, you cannot delete it anymore. I think they make certain exceptions, like if you publish something for which you didn't have the rights to publish, and before they get sued, they'll delete it. But normally, once you publish it, it's there forever. So let's write left pad in Scala so we can add it to Maven Central. This will be the first 90% of our project for a very small value of 90. Fortunately for what we're doing, it doesn't really matter if you have 5 lines of code in your library or 5,000. All the rest that we need to do here is the same. So let's use left pad. OK, first we have to set up a project. Now, if you created a project with an IDE, stop doing that. You want a command line first build. So there are 2 reasons for it. One is you want other people to contribute to your library. That means they have to be able to build it. And this is easiest if you don't have to give them instructions for setting up your favorite IDE in exactly the right way. They should just be able to check out that source code and type spt compile and make it compile. And the second reason is we want to run it on some build server for continuous integration in a later step, which also needs a command line. So we start with spt. And if you want other people to work on your code base, you need to make sure that whatever stuff they break actually gets detected. So you need tests, so we don't have any regression. So add a test framework of your choice. I use JUnit here mainly because I wrote the JUnit integration for SBT. So let's do these steps first. We need basically 4 files for this. There's a bunch of other files that got auto-created because of the way I set up the project and because I already compiled it. The first thing you want to do is under projects, create a build.properties, which nails down the SBT version. You want reproducible builds. You don't want your build to depend on whatever version of the SBT launcher somebody has installed. So nail down the SBT version. We're using 0.13.13 here. The second step is in build.sbt, nail down the Scala version. You want Scala 2.12.1. And every time you upgrade, this needs to be a conscious decision. You don't want it to depend randomly on the environment. For testing, we use JUnit interface, so I'm adding a library dependency here. And I scoped it to test. This becomes important when we publish the library. You don't want your actual library code to depend on this test interface and on JUnit, but only your test classes. So our actual implementation is here. It's under source main Scala. And I wrote a unit test, which is under source test Scala. So let's go to SBT and run the test. And it's compiling, and it should find one test and run it. There we go, passed 1. OK. So now we can think about sharing the project on GitHub. We need 2 more things for that. The first is a README file, and the second one a license. So I'm not typing this stuff in. I'm just switching to a different commit here so I don't make any typos. But I'll walk you through all of the changes I'm making. There's nothing hidden. So here's a README. And we make it a readme.md. We write it in Markdown so you can do some nice formatting. And don't just think of this as a README. It can be much more. For example, if you look at typesafe config, this is the GitHub page for typesafe config. And I'm currently scrolling through the README file. So you don't need to set up some homepage for your project. You have your GitHub page. And down here is the README. And all the rest, that's the whole documentation. It's all in the README. So unless you have a really big library, that's probably all you're going to need for documentation. So the other thing is a license. You want a permissive open source license. The most important thing is that you have a license. You have a file called license, and you put the license text in it. Otherwise, nobody in their right mind will ever use your library because they don't know what they're getting into. So we use the Apache license for all our open source projects, so that's what I'm doing here. You can read more about the different kinds of licenses here if you want to go into the details. So now we set up this project on GitHub. So I'm going to my repositories page here, and I'm creating a new one called leftpad. And it tells me the steps I need to do. I already have my Git repo initialized locally, so what I'm doing is this. I'm just pushing it. OK, there's a project on GitHub. You have your issues, you have your pull requests. You also get a wiki, but be careful about using that for documentation. I'd rather not use it. The problem is that this stuff you put into the wiki is not versioned together with your library. So people never know what version some wiki page was written for. I'd rather keep things in the README for simple projects, or use a documentation tool like Ornate if you need something bigger. I'm just using this as an opportunity to advertise for Ornate because I wrote it. But a README is fine here. So, and we have it on GitHub, so now we can publish it to Maven Central, which is probably the most dreaded of all the steps we're doing here. Fortunately, there's very good documentation for this these days. So we're going to use the documentation in the SBT manual about using Zonotype, and also another page about SBT PGP, which is a plugin that we need. We need three things: coordinates, signing, and metadata. So let's start with the coordinates. Maybe let me switch to the right commit here. OK, here's a build.sbt. We need the group ID, name, and version number in our project. For the group ID, you need some reverse domain name, like a package name, that you own. So if you have your own domain, you can use that for publishing. I own novocode.com, so that's what I'm using. If you don't have your own domain, you can use your GitHub account. So I would use com.github.szeiger. Then we have our name, leftpad, and a version number. I would recommend to always set this to a snapshot version in every commit that you check into your repository. Otherwise, somebody could check this out, make modifications, and accidentally publish a modified version under a non-snapshot version number to his local repository, and run into strange compatibility problems. So the next thing we need to do is signing. We need a public key, public-private key pair, a PGP key, and we need to use it to sign all the artifacts like jar files and POM files and other stuff that we publish to Maven Central, because Maven Central requires this. So there's a plugin for that. So we added it's in plugins.sbt. We add this SBT PGP plugin. And first, let's go to the documentation. So everything I'm doing is explained on this page, so you just have to follow this page. I'm just summing up here. I'm really following the documentation. Or maybe before we get into signing, yeah. Here's an important part that you need to do. Now that you have your domain name, your group ID, you need to create an account on the Zonotype Jira tracker, and you need to open a ticket there for the first time you publish under this group ID, because they have to manually approve you that you're allowed to publish to this group ID. So this is something that can take between a few minutes and a few days. So do this early. I'm using my com.novocode name here because I already have permission to publish to this. So now we have to look into signing. Let's assume you don't have any PGP key yet. So we're following the documentation, and we use PGP CMD gen key in SBT. You don't have to install PGP or anything for that. It's all done by the plugin. And it tells us we have to set this. OK. Let's call it test user, test@example.com. And the passphrase is 12345, because I have the same combination on my luggage. OK, we created a key. What I'm doing for the next few steps here is to actually reactivate my main key. Right? This shouldn't be there. So, but we will use the key that I just created later. I'm just switching back to a different one for the reason that this is already published on a key server, because that's the next step we need to do here. So scrolling further down in the manual, it tells us that we need to upload the key that we created to a key server. We can already sign our artifacts with this key, but signing is useless if nobody can verify that the signature is correct. So the public key needs to be on some key server. So you have to run this command here. And that's why I'm switching back to a different key that is already published. I don't want to publish this test key. So, and then continuing in this documentation, it gives us a lot of boilerplate we have to copy. The first one is this sonatype.sbt file. When you created this account on Jira for the sonatype ticket, you got a username and password. So you put this into your sonatype.sbt file. You have to trust me that I already have this file. I obviously cannot show it to you because it contains my real text password. And then we have these few blocks here, and we just copy them to our build script, to build.sbt. So this one, just copy it. License, of course, you have to change the license to the correct value. And the home page is just the GitHub page. Also GitHub for the SCM info, and my email address and home page, and publish Maven style, and publish artifact in test. And there's another setting called publish to, which tells SBT where to push these artifacts, to which URL. And this is the stuff I copied from the SBT documentation. So for releases, we want to publish it to this address here. And there's a different one for snapshots. Now, I would recommend that you never publish snapshots to anything but your local repository. Snapshots are not reproducible because you can overwrite them. So you can never be sure which version you get when you ask for a snapshot. It's OK for local testing. Like I publish a snapshot to my local repository and then I immediately use it to test some other project. But never publish them anywhere else. Just put your git SHA or a timestamp or whatever into a proper version number. So yeah, that should be pretty much it. And now we can say publish signed. Well, maybe let's start with publish local signed to make sure that our signatures work. Publish local signed. Because we're publishing this snapshot version locally. Entering my passphrase. No, oh, wait. I think I would have to reload first. There we go. OK, I successfully published in my local repository a signed snapshot version. Now we want to publish to, yes, there's a question.
So in the previous where you had the local and you said don't publish it there, but it looked like that was to Nexus on that one, or is that local?
No, that's for Maven. Not really Maven Central. It's on Sonatype system. So Sonatype runs a snapshot repository in parallel to Maven Central. This is a no. Oh. So I would advise to do something like this. Just don't use this one. Oh, okay. So only do it for local repositories. So now we can publish a real version to Sonatype. So I have to set the version number to a non-snapshot. So we're going to publish 0.1. And now we can publish signed. And it can take a few seconds. In the meantime, we will log into Nexus using the account you got earlier when you signed up for Jira. Are we done? Yes, we're done. So go to staging repositories. There at the bottom, that's my package. And if I go into content, I can see all the artifacts that I just published down here. So there's our POM and our jar and lots of signature files. And now I select close. So that's like a transaction. When you publish the first file, it automatically creates a new staging repository for you. And then eventually you have to close it. And at this point, it runs its consistency checks. It will verify the signature. It will verify that all the metadata, like your user ID and the SCM info is there, and that a proper open source license was selected, and so on. And if there are any problems, it will show up in the summary. I have to refresh here. OK, so you can see it says closed, and last operation completed successfully. If I had used that new key that we just created and didn't publish, for example, then this would have failed. So all we have to done is really go into release and click confirm. If I click confirm here, this library ends up on Maven Central, and it's there forever. I'm not going to do that. I'll cancel. Instead, I will drop it. That's what you do when you think something went wrong. You can always drop it. And I frequently forget this final step. That's why we want to automate it eventually. Whenever you publish something, you want to tag it with a version tag. So let's do git tag -a-m, call it release 0.1, v 0.1. Always use something starting with a lowercase v for your version numbers, and we'll see in a moment why. And git push origin v 0.1, push it to GitHub. So where's the project? Here. I reload this. There's a version tag, and you can see it says one release, because GitHub detects that this v version number is a version tag, so it shows up as a release on GitHub. OK, we've successfully published to Maven Central. So let's add continuous integration or pull request validation. If you want other people to submit pull requests, you want them to be tested automatically. You don't want to have to check out their code and run your tests locally. So we can use Travis CI for that. So let's go to Travis. It's here. They have a getting started guide. And by the way, all these pages I'm showing you here in the web browser, all the links are on the slides, so you don't have to write anything down. There's a getting started guide. There are specific instructions to have for Scala. But all we really need to do is one small file, right, called .travis.yml. That's all you have to do. Language is Scala. We have to select a JDK and a script to run. So this is just SBT test. So whenever somebody opens a pull request or you push a commit to GitHub, it will run this command SBT test on it. So let's push this. OK. Maybe I pushed too early. Wait. First, we need to enable this for the repository. So you have to sign into Travis CI with your GitHub account. And then you see all your repositories here. There's LeftPad, and I enable it for LeftPad. And now I should see a build. Oh, that's because I was running this earlier. Somehow it still remembered my repository. This shouldn't be there. Maybe I can trick it into running. No. Just make a small change. Oh, yeah. There we go. Oh, this really was my old repository. OK. Oh. I have to synchronize the account here. I did this at least half a dozen times. It never failed in this way. So it's syncing my accounts from GitHub. OK. Here's the new LeftPad that I just created. And we should see build history, no builds yet. Let's go back to the other commit. And now this should trigger a build. OK, there we go. Now I push the new commit, and it triggers a build. And at some point, this will start running. So in the meantime, maybe one point to explain. If you go to the Travis documentation for Scala builds, it will explain something about a build matrix. So you can cross-build Scala projects against different Scala versions. And the way they explain this for Travis is that you put your Scala versions into the .travis.yml file, and then Travis will run your build separately against these Scala versions, instead of using SBT to cross-build. I would recommend not doing this, because I like to keep my versions in the SBT script in one place and not put them into the .travis.yml. So that's why I changed this to just run SBT build. Yeah, Travis is a bit slow today. Oh, it's actually building. OK, it's building. Yes, Dale.
There's an SBT plugin to find a version from the YAML file.
Sorry.
Version in SBT from the YAML file.
Oh, OK. So as Dale just informed me, there's an SBT plugin to get in SBT to get the version from the YML file. So you can do it the other way around too if you want. Again, this is an opinionated approach, so there are different ways to do it. And this is still, yeah, it's building. We can move on while it's building and get back to that. So let's make things a bit more complicated. Usually you don't have a single project. At some point, you always want a multi-project build, because, for example, you're adding an SBT plugin. Who wouldn't want an SBT plugin that offers a left pad command in SBT, right? So that's what we're going to add. Now, you may want to fight the urge to make it a multi-project build because you think it's complicated. It used to be more complicated in the past. Nowadays, it's almost straightforward in SBT. So don't resist switching to a multi-project build. Don't try using configurations instead of projects or something. Just switch to a multi-project build if you need it. Do it sooner rather than later. So we're going to do that. So what I did now is to move my source folder into another folder called core. So now we have core source main and core source test. I also added this plugin folder with a source main. And there's the SBT plugin. So it's here. This is not about writing SBT plugins. Just stay in this room after my talk, and you can watch Justin explain how to write SBT plugins. Instead, we're going to look at the build file again. So, OK. So now we have two projects in SBT. Actually, we have three projects. We have the core project, which is here. We have the plugin project, and we have a root project. And this root project aggregates core and plugin. SBT will automatically create a root project for you, but if you want more control, you can write it down explicitly, and then, for example, say aggregate. So by default, SBT drops you into this root project, and if I type compile, it doesn't know what to do. But if I aggregate core and plugin, then if I type compile in the root project, it will automatically run compile in my core and plugin project, and that's just what I want. We have lots of common settings that apply to all these projects, and this is where it gets a bit awkward. I have to scope all of these to this build. Otherwise, they only apply to the root project. So I'm doing it explicitly here, but there's a shortcut you can use. This is just all the data we had before. I just compacted it a bit, but it's exactly the same. I just scope it to in this build because it applies to all our projects. The only thing we do differently is basically the name, of course, the test dependency for core. For the plugin project, we pick the name SBT-leftpad. That's a common convention. We tell it it's an SBT plugin. And yeah, here's a problem. SBT plugins all have to use Scala 2.10. We used Scala 2.12 before, and I want to continue using Scala 2.12, but we need to cross-build now. So the plugin project has to be cross-built for Scala 2.10, or built only for Scala 2.10, and now the core project has to be cross-built for Scala 2.10 and Scala 2.12. This looks easy enough, and actually in a single project build it would be. Unfortunately, that's not how cross-building in SBT works, because by default it would only pick the Scala versions from the root project and try to apply them to everything, and that fails because we cannot build the SBT plugin on 2.12. Fortunately, there's an SBT plugin for everything, including this, and it's called SBT Doge. So I'm adding that here, and I'm enabling this cross per project plugin on root, and that comes from SBT Doge. And this overrides SBT's plus notation for cross-building to do exactly what I want, which is cross-build with the version in each project individually. So let's try this. Reload. And plus test. OK, this worked. We got our cross-build. Now we have to publish it. You can theoretically publish an SBT plugin to Maven Central. There were historical reasons why you didn't do that. Nowadays you can, but we have a special SBT repository on Bintray, which aggregates all these plugins. So that's the preferred way of publishing it. So instead of publishing to Sonatype, we will now publish to Bintray. Fortunately, there's again a plugin for that. So let's switch to this. Next commit. So here's the Bintray SBT plugin. There's really not much to configure here. One thing I did is to set Bintray on release to false. By default, it would automatically release something that we publish. If you want that, it's OK. You can also have this with an SBT Sonatype plugin for publishing to Sonatype. Unfortunately, it's the default here. I don't like it. I want a final validation step to be manual, so I turn it off. I want to manually publish this. And then, of course, there's this nice blob of code here. So yeah, there's no easy way to disable publishing for an SBT project. I basically want to say, do not publish anything for root. This should be a one-liner, but it's not. You can say publish artifact equals false, which looks like the right thing, but it would still publish a POM file or an IV descriptor. And who knows what the Bintray plugin might do in the background. So I disable Bintray, I tell it not to publish, and then I override all the publishing commands that I might use so that it really, really does nothing for the root project. The only other thing I need is to set the Bintray repository here. So the core project will end up in JSON and Maven Central. The plugin knows how to publish that. For SBT repositories, we have to create a separate SBT plugins project, or what do they call it, repository on Bintray. So let's head over to Bintray. Let's see if I'm still signed in. Probably not. I am. OK. So I'm already in this. No, I'm not signed in, right? Yeah, Bintray throws you out after 5 minutes or so. That's really annoying. So after you sign up the first time, you have to create this SBT plugins repository. I already have one, but there's really not much to it. I could just create a new one, SBT-plugins, and the type is generic. Again, the SBT documentation explains all these steps in detail. So that's it. And now I could publish. There's still two things we need to do. The first is authentication, because we don't have this Bintray credentials file. And the second one is there's a bug in the Bintray plugin which prevents it from properly initializing your package the first time you do this. So let's do it in baby steps here. Just try core/publish. Okay, it appears to hang, but somewhere along the way it asked for my username. So let's run it again. There we go. My username, and I need my API key. So I go to my profile here, get my API key. There we go. Reload, and try it again. And okay, this is the error message we expect. Snapshot files cannot be uploaded. Okay, let's try the same for the plugin. Okay, invalid version name. Good. Because what this did along the way was to create these packages. So if I go into my Maven repository here, I can see there's now a package called leftpad that this command created. You can create this manually, but you have to enter some metadata, so it's easier to let SBT do it. So let's publish it for real this time. So we set the version to 0.1 and double check the version, and we will notice that this didn't work because we only set the version on the root project. So yeah, let's do it the correct way and set every version. Just put it into every subproject you have. Now we can publish. So publish signed. Oh, and of course it's a cross build, right? So we need plus publish signed to publish it for 2.10 and 2.12. And there we go. It's on its way to bin tray. Okay. If I reload this page or just go into leftpad here, it tells me you have 32 unpublished items, and now I can publish them. Unfortunately, I have yet to find a way to see these before I publish them, so it's probably not that useful. You have to trust that it's actually the right thing. So published, okay. And I go to my SBT plugins repository. Yes?
Are you saying that that's just not being able to see the artifacts before you publish them?
Yes.
You're saying that's just a weird thing about the web UI, or is there actually not a staging repository that you can add to your project like you do with Sonatype?
I have not been able to find any way to see it. So
oh, wow.
I don't know if there is one. I only see this message. I looked for it. I did not find it. Like in Sonatype, I showed you earlier, you can just expand this tree and look at all the artifacts. There doesn't seem to be a way to do it here. At least it's well hidden. OK, so I published both of these. And now we want to get this, this stuff linked to the proper SBT plugins repository and get our project back into Maven Central, right? So for SBT plugins, no, baby. Let's start with the other one. First, we need the library published before anyone can use the SBT plugin, because the plugin depends on it. So let's go to this package here for leftpad, and here's a button, Add to JSONer. If I press this, I can request them to verify that I'm allowed to publish this, just like the manual verification step on Sonatype. And then it will be linked to JSONer. And after they have approved my request, I can go to this Maven Central tab here. I can show it to you on a different package that's already linked. So I'm going over here to Ornate, Maven Central. So this is already in JSONer. And now I can enter my Sonatype credentials and have it sync it over to Maven Central. So once it's in JSONer, it's basically one click away from Maven Central. After, of course, you still get your account on Maven Central, on Sonatype, and get your permission there. You still have to do these steps beforehand, and then you can just sync whenever you want from JSONer. And there's a similar thing you can do for the SBT plugin. So if we go to the SBT documentation here, is this the right link? No. That's the one. So that's similar to linking it to JSONer. You go to this SBT plugin releases repo and ask for include my package, sbt-leftpad. Leftpad, OK. And now if I click send, I'm pretty sure Dale up here in the front will get an email asking for this plugin to be included. And that's for the first time we publish this. After your package is linked into the SBT plugin releases repo or linked into JSONer, you can just publish new versions whenever you want. That's only for the first version you publish. So there's one last thing I want to do here. That's tag-based publishing. We've done everything manually now. We published to JSONer, we published to Maven Central, we published to the SBT repo. Now we want to do it tag-based. That means just push the version tag to GitHub and then have it run on Travis CI and automatically publish it from there. So there's a Travis CI command line client that we need for that, and we have to follow the documentation, which explains all this stuff. And of course, I haven't started from scratch. I copied my build script that I'm using from Scala parallel collections, where I in turn copied it from some other Scala project. These things just evolve over time. And I heard that someone is working on a SBT plugin to simplify this. So soon there will be a plugin for this as well. So let's switch to this template. OK. Oh. Yeah, in travis.yml, of course, in the step before for the multi-project build, I changed this to SBT plus test to cross-build. I forgot to show you this part. So now I'm changing it again to run a custom shell script, admin/build.sh. Let's go here and look at this. And at the core, it still does SBT plus test. But it does something extra. So whenever Travis CI builds a commit that has a tag associated, we get this Travis tag environment variable set. And here's a really ugly regular expression, which just says, starts with a lowercase v followed by something that looks like a version number. So whenever we have a version tag, we want to release that version. It will tell you going to release from tag, Travis tag. So publish version does set every version to whatever that version is. That's the same thing we did manually just a few minutes ago. And the extra target is set to plus publish signed in order to publish all this stuff. So of course, we need to take care of the public key signing and the bin tray credentials. So we add an extra .sbt file, which is called publish settings, and copy this to the root of the project. So you may have seen different kinds of .sbt files under project, like plugins.sbt. They don't have to be called build.sbt. The same is true for the root project. You don't just you cannot just have a build.sbt there, but also a publish settings.sbt or whatever, and they will just be merged into one project. So here it is. It just sets the locations because we don't want to copy this stuff to some home directory. The build machine creates a new virtual disk image for us when we build. So there's no persistent state that we could use. We have to put everything into the project. So our pubring and secring files will live under admin, and the passphrase is hard-coded here. And the bin tray credential files also goes under admin. Now, of course, these two files, the secring and the bin tray credentials, they contain secret data. That's the private PGP key and my credentials to log into bin tray. So nobody should be able to read them. Only the build machine that runs this build should be able to decrypt them, but nobody else. There are different ways to do this on Travis. And I'm linking to the simplest one for encrypting files. So let's follow these instructions that I wrote down here in order to do this. First, we need the secring and pubring files. So I'm going to copy them over. These are the ones that we created earlier. they're in .sbt/GPG. Yeah, these two. Go to admin. And then I need my bin tray credentials. I copy them. And I put the secring and the bin tray credentials into a tar file. So why am I doing that? Well, unfortunately, this simple way of encrypting files on Travis only works for a single file per repository. There are other ways to encrypt multiple files, but it's so much more work that we're just going to put them into a tar and encrypt this tar. So this is now encrypted in a way that Travis CI can decrypt it in order to run the build. So it's not as secure as you may want it, but it's probably secure enough. Unless the Travis security is breached, then you're fine. So one thing this simple command did behind the scenes was to modify the .travis.yml. You can see there's now an extra command in before install, which will automatically decrypt this file again. So whenever you run a build, it decrypts the secrets. Now, this only goes for builds coming from your own repository. So when somebody forks your repository, these secrets are no longer valid. When somebody opens a pull request from a branch on his own fork against your repository, these secrets are not valid. So nobody can get at them unless they have commit permission to your repository. So I think we went through all the instructions here. Let me just get back to that. OK, well, we want to remove the secret data, which is now encrypted. And the passphrase is already set to 12345. And just to be sure that we don't accidentally commit this data ever, I added it to the .gitignore. So never commit this secret data unencrypted. You only want the encrypted version on Travis. So we just add this stuff. Get a .travis.yml. Wait. OK. Tag-based publishing. And push it to GitHub. So now we have our tag-based publishing set up, and let's test it. So we go back to the project on GitHub. Where is it? There. So now instead of pushing a version tag to GitHub from Git, I just create it here. So I'm in the releases screen, and I just say draft a new release, which just means create a tag. I'm calling this release 0.2 and publish release. And if we did everything correctly, Travis CI should now run a release build. There it is. You can see it's called v0.2, so that's a tag. It's building a tagged release. Let me just cancel this one, maybe. Where do I cancel? Does anyone know where I cancel it? I did it earlier. I just don't want to waste any time. Oh, under current. No. OK, we'll just wait. So it's running the build. It should eventually build it. So in the meantime, I wanted to do some more next steps, but maybe I'll leave them to you as an exercise because we don't have any time for them. So the next thing I would do is look into binary compatibility. So when you evolve your library, you need to make sure whether it's binary compatible or not. You probably want your major versions. You probably don't need your major versions to be binary compatible, but you want it for your minor versions. So there's a plugin for that called Mima, Migration Manager, that you can add to your SBT build. And that's something you should do whenever you want to evolve your library, make sure it stays binary compatible. You could also automate publishing a proper manual like the one you create with Ornate and your Scala docs and upload that automatically to GitHub pages. You can do it in a similar way to publishing the artifacts to Maven Central. And you can add more stuff like Scala doc link checking. If you link from an HTML file for your Scala docs, just like running your test on your code, you can run a link checker on your Scala doc links to make sure your links are not broken. So there's lots of options to explore. So I'd like to sum up by showing you what you need in order to reproduce this. Now, I selected some basic skills here. You should be familiar with Git. You should learn the basics. I'm linking to this tutorial here. You can pick up more details as you go along. You should be familiar with your build tool. You may be thinking, hey, this guy just tricked me into coming to an SBT talk. Actually, I tricked myself into creating an SBT talk. That wasn't my intention. It just turned out to be an SBT talk. For these CI scripts, CI build scripts, and tag-based publishing, you need to be familiar with some basic Unix shell scripting. And for writing your documentation, you should learn Markdown, which is pretty much the standard nowadays, on GitHub at least. So these are the services you need. They're all free. You need an account on GitHub. You need an account on Sonatype if you want to publish to Maven Central. And you need to sign up for Travis CI with your GitHub account and for Bintray, especially if you want to publish an SBT plugin, then it should go to Bintray. I will delete this leftpad project again after this talk, but there's a copy under leftpad-template on my GitHub. And all these commits, the numbered commits C1 to C7 that we stepped through, they're all in this repository, so you can follow along and try to repeat these in your own project. And yeah, please remember to write the session if you liked it. Please forget about it if you didn't. And before I open this up for questions, let's look at the log file here. It's complete. Let's see, release, going to release from tag v0.2. And it did, and it published something, so let's go to Bintray. No, not this Bintray. I want to go to Maven and leftpad. And we have 32 unpublished items. Publish. And there's version 0.2, so we successfully published it from Travis CI. Thank you.
It's not really a question, it's more like a comment. So when you publish a library on Maven Central or on Bintray, it will be automatically indexed by the Scala index. So index.scalalang.org. So yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you. I didn't know that.
My question is about Sonatype and Bintray. I've always been confused about why you might choose one or the other or need both. Did I understand correctly that if I want to publish to Maven Central, I must use Sonatype?
So Sonatype is the company that runs Maven Central. And I don't know all the details. Maybe I got some of them wrong. But as far as I know, Maven Central is much older than JCenter. So that was traditionally the choice to publish all your artifacts. Like for Maven, for example, that's why it's called Maven Central. SBT supports both out of the box. So if all your users are on SBT, it doesn't really matter if you have it on Maven Central or JCenter. But you can, as you've seen, publish to Bintray, link it to JCenter, and then from there sync it back to Maven Central. But you still need your account on Sonatype for that, and you need to be approved by Sonatype in order to sync it.
And those last few steps that you were doing in the browser where you finally published, do you eventually automate those with CI as well, or you just have to do that through the browser?
Oh, I did those manually on purpose. Wait, maybe let's go back to, where's my, That's this line here. Bintray release on publish equals false. I did this deliberately. If you don't include this line, it will automatically publish. For the Maven Central publishing, you still have to log into Bintray and click sync after you published it. But all the other stuff like clicking on publish, that's not necessary. Okay, no more questions, and thanks again.